Saf, what's going on, dude?
Hey Joe, good
Hi.
talking.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of funny. We're both Salt Lakers, but we're recording this virtually. So,
Yeah, we're
you're out of yeah. So it goes.
yeah, absolutely. Too
Yeah.
much, too much traveling. Mostly for you though. I shouldn't speak like I travel even 10% as much as you.
But where are you at right now?
I'm in New York, just visiting family and
Cool.
coworker here.
Nice. New York City or state?
State, a little bit upstate.
Nice. Fun
Yeah,
times.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So, yeah, I think we met a few times in Salt Lake City, which is cool. You're a fellow data nerd, and it's always good to have more of a more data nerds in great old Utah here. Um, but yeah, I think it first came across you giving a talk over at the data engineering meetup on
yes.
Snowflake costs.
hmm
Um, what I guess we'll start off with that costs. Why would anyone care about costs? Why not just throw more compute at things and just let our cool analytical tools do their thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think costs really came up um, with the economic downturn slash shift, and feels like late 2022 now. I guess everything's okay again, right?
Back to
But
normal. I'm just kidding.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Never gonna hear about costs again. But yeah, I think a lot of people started talking about costs when they started looking at their cloud bills in the scheme of like just broader ways of becoming more efficient given the economic situations. And then at that time, we were probably like a lot of companies were kind of deeply into this modern data stack stuff. A lot of like really easy to use tools. And if you kind of zoom out, we've never really democratize this level of compute power to like as broad of a population within organizations and more broadly. So what I mean is like business analysts and data analysts and product managers and pretty much everyone up and down the rung can access compute in your Databricks or Snowflake really easily. So as a result, there's kind of a scalability challenge that I think a lot of people were seeing with nonlinear kind of compounding growth of compute costs in their organizations.
What do you think this is attributed to, though? I have my own theories. What do you think? It's a knowledge thing? Do you think it was just a zero interest rate phenomena? Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Cause that?
Well, at the foundation of it all is, usage-based pricing. The more you use these technologies, the more you're going to pay. I think that actually is a really good way to price for both the consumer and the vendor. Like a lot of people have, I think, taken digs at that pricing model. I don't really understand the arguments against it, but feel free to let me know if you have.
What are the
anything that makes
arguments
sense.
against it that you've heard?
I don't think they've been logical. They've just been like, oh, it's really expensive, and it turns out the we've been penalized for our increased usage. I think people feel like the more they use it, they should maybe get some economies of scale from using it. And that may be true, but you can still get those by negotiating your contracts every year as you get more usage. And most of these vendors will give you a discount, Snowflake, Databricks, etc. The more you use their product. But definitely, there's maybe some semantic arguments around what we mean by usage. Like usage in the Fivetran concept is like more rows, more money, and value is not really proportional to rows necessarily, nor is it maybe proportional to how many queries you're running on Snowflake. So I think the value to usage disconnect is, I think, where people start getting upset about how much they're paying for their tools. So the more you can align value with what usage means, broadly speaking, in the vendor context, I think the happier you'll be. But obviously, they're not one-to-one.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard some arguments that we're better off going back on-prem and running everything. Maybe you are. I don't know. I think that depends if you want to do that. But the pricing models, I mean, before the modern data stack, which I kind of date to about 2012. I mean, I recall, negotiations with like Oracle and other types of companies like that, and you'd be paying a boatload of money, and with very aggressive salespeople.
Yep.
And very onerous contracts that if you try and get out of them, good luck. Good luck to you.
Feels like we're
So,
better off today than that. I don't know. Feels like we moved forward.
yeah, I mean, but yeah, it's exactly. Like, I have a hard time understanding the rationale. Like, oh, let's go back to those days. I'm like, if you want to go back to those days, I mean, by all means, it's a free country. Do what you want.
Absolutely.
You can,
Yep.
if you like your Oracle rep, you can keep your Oracle rep. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Basically, it feels like the easy thing to do is, blame the vendor when you get like this cost explosion. But really,
yeah,
I think to me, what it's about is really taking full responsibility over how you're using those tools, and it is your responsibility to align value with usage, and that's not something that's a hard problem to solve. I'll admittedly, but
hmm
most people just start using. They don't start actually realizing value
yeah,
on that same time scale, and the disconnect grows over time, and then it's like, oh my god, my costs have blown up, my value has not increased at the same rate,
yep.
maybe not at all, and yeah, you're left with that kind of dissonance and unhappiness.
Oh, for sure. And it's not like people blame the vendors. We'll pick Snowflake as an example, right? Everyone picks on Snowflake for being expensive.
Yeah,
They clearly document ways you can efficiently use Snowflake to save money. It's not like
for
they
sure.
keep this a secret behind a paywall.
Yep.
Um, anyone can go find this, and I would say, a large part of the work that I do, or till recently kind of scaled back consulting, but a lot of it was just helping people understand where to look, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. People just start using it. But I noticed there's a pattern where people start using, say, Snowflake, kind of how they would maybe a transactional database. I've seen this countless times, doing direct row inserts
Yeah.
and crazy stuff like that. And then they're like, why is my compute bill so high? One
Yeah.
instance which would drive you crazy, Seth. So like there was one company that they bought a pretty large commit contract on Snowflake. And I think they burned through like 10% of their credits in the first week.
Yep, seen that
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I think the usage-based pricing model is kind of an underlying like mechanistic driver behind all this, but like you alluded to earlier, there's kind of a data literacy kind of issue as well. The technologies have developed faster than our collective kind of expertise in using them,
Mm,
and so we've handed compute to anyone and everyone and their mother, which is a great thing in one respect because it's like, oh, everyone can get knowledge from their data now. Let's democratize and let's just kind of experience all the positive side effects of that. But the negative side effects are that we haven't really educated everyone on how to efficiently, get insight and knowledge from zeros and ones in, sitting at rest in a Snowflake or Databricks warehouse. And so, these are really easy to use, beautifully designed products, I would say, in many respects. And so as a result, people love to use them and they continue to use them. But again, with the value disconnect in mind, they don't always use them for the best reasons for the business. So you end up blowing up your costs pretty quickly.
so what do you recommend to people? How if Saf was the benevolent educator of the world and with a mission to save everybody from blowing up their costs, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few kind of high level bullet points I recommend. One is that um, you really observe your costs, you pay attention to them, just like you would, whether it be budgeting or tracking in your personal life, take those principles with you into your organization and literally just have conversations about your costs every
Mm,
2 weeks or a month. Spin up like the easiest dashboard that you can imagine to look at your usage and bill, and democratize it. Don't just like um, if you're a manager, look at that Snowflake usage bill you get every month in your inbox and kind of yell and scream about it when it's higher than the previous months or unexpected, but really democratize that. Show everyone what you're spending and what you're spending it on. And once you kind of democratize that conversation, well, now everyone's not just going to be thinking about how lovely it is to have the compute at their fingertips, but also what business impact it might have.
mm,
What's the financial impact on their bottom line? So definitely democratizing kind of the cost metadata and the observability and the conversation to build cost consciousness into your culture. And then secondarily, minimize user error, actually follow what these vendors say themselves you should be doing. I mean, it's in their best interest to keep you long term and make sure that you're getting efficient usage. And
hmm
I think using the Snowflake documentation is a great first stab at it. And there's great blog posts out there. There's
Yeah.
tools out there to help you with observability and cost minimization. So you should do all those things. Honestly, if you just did these couple things, then you're likely going to be in a good place for a very, very long time.
Mm-hmm. Would you recommend rolling your own cost monitoring as well?
Yeah, you can roll your own pretty easily. There's some limitations in terms of how much visibility you can get out of kind of the metadata natively. So for example, in Snowflake, they meter by warehouse. And what that forces people to do is spin up warehouses for every single use case that they might want to meter separately. But you can use tools like I built a tool that's free on the marketplace that's called Arrow. There's like 10 other companies doing various forms of Snowflake optimization. Any number of these tools can help you get deeper observability into your costs by the user level, roles, applications that are consuming Snowflake data, et cetera, and really allow you to drill down and investigate any usage or cost spikes that you might experience. So I would say start by rolling your own, maybe start the conversation. Don't wait for finding the perfect tool or something off the shelf, but there's free tools out there you can use as well. So however you want to get started, I think is better than waiting.
What are your thoughts on tools like DuckDB, which allows you just to do your analytics locally for free?
Yeah, this is an area I've been thinking about, and I feel like the jury is kind of out on this. I think the dialogue around Snowflake and Databricks is largely around, your data is really big and you need these giant warehouses. It is true, kind of I guess what Mother Duck has been saying, maybe your data is not that big. Not everyone's data is that big. I think that's factually accurate, and you should know where you are in that spectrum and that space, and choose the right tool for the right job, and not overly anticipate that you're going to be processing petabytes of data one day. So let me use Spark today to process this Excel spreadsheet effectively. But a lot of people do that. It's kind of what I would call premature optimization, maybe the most severe form of it. And so if you can get away with using DuckDB locally and a DuckDB instance that people can share even to do your work, I think there's huge benefits to that. I think what I would caution is if you're going to pull open source tools off the shelf like that, it's not actually free. It feels free because you're deploying it on your laptop and maybe you're using your CPUs on your MacBook to process the data, but then someone's going to need to manage how that compute and data is shared across people. What are the ergonomics of kind of writing SQL against shared data? What's the data governance? Who's going to manage your tables for you, et cetera. So there's kind of the labor costs, the all-in labor costs that go into it. And that's certainly Snowflake's value prop that they market heavily towards, which is minimizing total cost of ownership. So just understand your total cost of ownership if you're going to go the DuckDB route or the Spark route.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's also something I call a total opportunity cost of ownership, which is you want to stay flexible as much as you can, be able to make reversible decisions. A cardinal sin is getting too, I think, stuck in the mud with your decision, and then it's that's painful.
Yep, right. Vendor lock, and I mean that's the name of vendor lock, and basically it's very hard to undo a decision like committing to a vendor when they have a proprietary table format, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And you start writing SQL that only works on a certain vendor's platform and not on others. So,
on that note, too, what's your thought on open table formats, and do you think that's a good idea for people to consider?
I think it's a great idea for people to consider. Yeah. I'm actually really excited about. It feels like we're still early there, and there's a lot of moving pieces and shuffling and land grabbing going on. But in the long term, it feels like an open table format that is efficient and can work really well with multiple SQL engines. I mean, it just feels like that unbundling is something that's going to benefit consumers everywhere. That doesn't mean it's the perfect choice for everyone, because like I said, when it comes to total cost of ownership, it feels like, I'm an engineer, so modularizing your compute separate from your data is definitely like a good idea. But from a vendor, from choosing vendors perspective, you do get some benefits from just like picking something that really just works sometimes, like a Snowflake or Databricks or whatever that offers kind of their storage format and compute in tandem, and it just works. But I think a lot of enterprises find if you do get to that point of success in your company's life cycle, that ultimately you might need to unbundle and decouple these things to get all the best of all the worlds.
Yeah, like literally the call I have after a recording is with a client who's in that same situation. They're moving onto they're trying to pick a cloud data platform right now. All the mainstream ones, but then I mentioned, Iceberg might be an interesting one for you. I'm like, oh, I want to do that too. I'm like, but let's maybe get started with a platform first, and then eventually do the Iceberg thing. I think
totally. And everyone's trying to avoid like future migrations in some sense. But I find like building a company and a team and a data platform is about like managing risk on multiple time horizons. These aren't forever decisions. So if you're buying a platform today, you're doing it so you can get to the point of having the luxury of making a decision to maybe change that. So that would be a good problem to have, actually, as much as everyone hates migrations.
No, it's just a fact of life. So totally. I think that you should congratulate yourself if you're in that position, like you're kind of hinting at. So go throw a party, the migration party. You earned
you're just a victim of your own success at that point.
Yeah. I mean, this particular company as well. I mean, they got really far just using a good old Postgres database and just triggering all their analytical workflows and sort of procedures. But it's brought to its knees now. Can't go any further, right? But that's also a thing too. I would say, for the audience, you can get pretty far using pretty boring tools.
Yeah.
But just understand you're gonna have to get out of that at some point. So.
I think boring is like highly correlated with simple, and I really strongly advocate for keeping it as simple for as long as possible. Because I think the killer for especially early engineering teams is often just complexity. I think our mutual friend Gordon once told me this rule of thumb that I always talk about, which is complexity times 2 is fragility times 10. So the second you maybe introduce like an unbundled solution very early in your team, you've added complexity. You should acknowledge that. And then things are going to break maybe 10 times as much as you would think. And now your team's going to be stuck doing that rather than improving your product and addressing your customer needs.
Yep. Happens a lot.
Yeah.
But I also kind of attribute that to, I think engineers wanted to engineer. So, and you're not going to get cool points if you're doing really boring stuff. Like, what are you going to talk about when you're at a meetup, over at the pizza table or, grabbing a beer? It's like, workflow is really boring. It's really simple. That's not going to impress anybody. So,
I feel like we should do better at coaching engineers to talk about the impact they have on customers. And the problem is they're usually 2+ degrees removed away from customer impact. So like teaching them to communicate and coaching them through that, then they can maybe get cool points from their fellow engineers for that. But you're right. They don't feel like they're learning necessarily if they're just doing the simplest thing and addressing customer needs more directly.
No, I mean, the elephant in the room too is I think a lot of engineers they're doing stuff that they're doing because of a kind of resume driven development. I mean, that's dirty secret. I don't even know if it's a dirty secret. It's just, it is what it is.
It is what it is. I mean, I've been there myself. So.
Oh, me too. All the time. Yeah. It's like, if you're going to learn tool X or tool Y, if Y is sexier and the cool thing, of course, you're going to want to do that. That gets you, that gets the cool points. It gets you your next job maybe too.
Totally. So. Yeah. When I talk to engineers who are bringing like a shiny new tool, if I'm a manager on a team, for example, I applaud them for like having the enthusiasm to go out and research and, bring an option to the table. So that's a really good conversation to have. And if if we start as a team going in a direction of like choosing something simpler, maybe more boring, and if I see kind of it feeling deflating to engineers who wanted to use the cool thing, I try to assure them that, hey, there's so many cool problems to solve still in spite of this. Those are the ones we should be focusing on, the ones with more direct impact. So like, it's kind of an illusion to think, I basically urge them to think this way. Like, it's an illusion to think that that cool thing would have made your job any cooler. Actually, your job's going to get even cooler now that we're using the boring thing, because you can focus on the cool and customer impactful problems. So there's no shortage of problems to solve basically at any company at any time.
But then, but there's always tools, right? So I mean, and what is it? Matt Turk's Mad Data Landscape came out last week.
The thing's getting unreadable.
It's getting unreadable. It's getting unsquintable. You can't even see any of the logos anymore. We had him on our show recently, and it was trying to show the landscape on a screen share for the audience. I was like, it's impossible to read. You have to keep zooming in. But that's also I think part of the confusion too. And we can get into this. The proliferation of tools in the modern data stack, for example. It's just downright confusing, I think, for a lot of people. So I don't know, how do you go about this though? I mean, because you spend a lot of time thinking about cost optimization, but at the same time, how do you balance the costs against just this giant constellation of options out there?
I mean, if you're considering picking from that giant universe of technologies in order to solve a problem that you have, you need to think about whether it's truly solving your problem and whether it's worth the cost that you're taking on. And you need to think about that cost on multiple time horizons, not just, over the next month where you might be using the shiny new thing and it works, but also how is it interacting with other parts of your stack? Is that thing going to be reading from your warehouse and maybe writing back into your warehouse, etc.? So you need to consider kind of the all-in cost. And this is like the hardest part of, negotiating with a vendor as an engineering leader, for example, because it's easy to look at kind of that bill and that's a number that you've assigned to that. But most of the costs are going to be in the labor costs of maintaining that new member of your stack and its interactions on other members of your stack that you already have. So it's higher order side effects. That's what people usually ignore. And that's what that's the situation a lot of people are in with the modern data stack, which is they probably have 2, 3, 10 different technologies from that, from Matt Turk's universe. And that's a complex data stack. And that complexity is resulting in a lot of like higher order costs, namely maintenance costs, debugging, investigating what the heck is going on, multiple sources of truth of data. So all the side effects that frankly people ignored probably because they were like bringing on some new technology to solve an urgent problem.
Oh yeah. And just for the audience too, that Matt Turk's Landscape is not a shopping list. So don't try and collect all of the technologies on there. Yeah. I think that's not the point. But well, yeah, there's definitely that the complexity is there for sure. And there's the interoperability or lack thereof with a lot of these tools. And that just compounds it because now you have to figure out ways to sort of duct tape all these tools together.
Duct tape is right.
Works. Yeah.
Got to build interfaces. And now your team has suddenly more work than they started with, even though you were supposed to move in a cost saving direction. Right. So you just really have to be conscious about that kind of, I guess, to use like an economic or financial term. I feel like everyone needs to be trained in finance, ideally. This is the FinOps people are very good at this and cost optimization. They're a unique breed. But if you can think of like the choice of bringing on a new technology in terms of net present value, applying like some sort of discounting term. So really, what is the net present value of adding DBT to my stack, right? Well, in the next 6 months, it'll solve a problem for me, the problem that I can articulate very, very clearly. But what side effects isn't going to have on other parts of my org, on hiring, and on how my org is going to operate, 3 years down the line, right? And simply just having the conversation, even presenting counterfactuals, like, what would it mean for this vendor purchase or this integration that we're considering to go horribly wrong? Why would that have happened if we play it forward in the future? I think it's called not a postmortem, but there's some term for this kind of conversation, some business term. But that conversation is a healthy one to have with your engineering team when you're considering adding a shiny new tool or buying
like something. A pre-mortem.
Pre-mortem, that's it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Using your imagination to see kind of what all the possible paths to success and failure are.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, net present value. I never thought of it that way. That's an interesting angle. Um, it's a good way to look at things.
Yeah,
I guess you
hard
have
to
to
actually
determine.
calculate, but yeah.
Yeah. It'd be like, what would be the rate, I suppose, in quotes that you'd be using to calculate your NPV. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's interesting thought. Yeah, kind of swing into the modern data stack. Like, it's lots of eulogies recently about it, and obituaries and so forth. Is modern data stack dead, or is it still going on?
I mean, it's still going on. I mean, I think we've been eulogizing maybe the terminology and the semantics in favor of things that we feel are better descriptions of what it is we're doing and what it is we're buying and selling. But underneath it all, it's the same problems and similar technologies that are evolving. I think broadly speaking, the modern data stack kind of to me marked like an advancement in how we do compute on data, how
Yeah.
we kind of democratize that to really broad populations. Um, and it kind of it feels like a lot of people have, you know, developed a lot of concerns about the modern data stack because they've seen a lot of problems. But these are problems that were there before. I think we're just staring them in the face more. I was talking to Dan Golden the other day. I don't know if you know Dan. He's been on
Mm-mm.
LinkedIn too. But yeah, we were talking about DBT, and a lot of people have been like digging at DBT, and DBT is a big member of the modern data stack. So I think it's fair to call them like a representative in some way. But I mean, to me, it's non-negotiable that DBT's been an advancement for us collectively,
Yeah.
and we can't necessarily blame DBT as a technology or a company for all the all the problems we're facing. In fact, we can thank them for all the problems that we can now see and stare in the face. We were in a world of stored procedures and scripts of who knows what provenance
Oh yeah.
6-10 years ago, and now with DBT, it feels like we have new problems, but I would surmise that those are problems that already existed. It feels like new problems because maybe it's more work for us, but now we can stare those problems in the face and truly solve them. But they're not solved yet, certainly. And DBT doesn't solve the problem for us. It gives us a means to kind of observing and addressing them with version control and best software
Hmm.
engineering practices. So anyway, I think modern data stack is here. It's going to continue evolving. It's just like kind of one, I guess, flag that we put down in 2018 to 2024 was like the era of modern data stack, but it's going to keep getting more modern, believe it or not.
What do you mean by that?
I think we're just going to keep getting better at all the things that the modern data stack got us better at. So we talk about separating storage and compute. We talk about bringing software engineering practices to data engineering. To me,
Hmm.
those are like just thinking ad hoc here. I think those are two big things that the MDS has given us.
Yeah.
But we're getting better at better at both of those. I mean, we just talked about open table formats and the
Yep.
continuous kind of unbundling. So that's even a better separation of storage and compute and more flexible things that can we can mix and match and build a really great stack for ourselves that is more flexible going forward over a long time horizon. And then when it comes to software engineering, I mean, you talked to Toby recently, like DBT SQL Mesh.
Mhm.
SQL Mesh is like maybe a next evolution of DBT, or there's going to be other tools like that. So
Mhm.
is that not the modern data stack as well? It's the more modern data stack or something. Yeah.
It gets very meta after a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, there's other practices. It feels like data. I always joke it's like 5, 10, sometimes 15 years behind software and a lot of practices, and they're not the same things. But I think I've always quipped, if you want to know where at least data engineering is going or data is going, just look at where software engineering has been. There's a lot of practices that we can take. Data ops is another one. And so but it definitely makes working with data better. I mean, back in the good old days, you would learn that your stuff's broken because people would yell at you about it, or you wouldn't
Yeah.
find out for years actually, because the data's all wrong.
Totally.
That happens all the time still. So we're getting better at it. I mean, my take on this is I feel like the modern data stack made it easier to work with tools. I don't know that we've gotten any better at solving the core problems of data,
Yeah.
which is quote adding value to the business with data. These conversations I'm pretty tired of hearing about actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, it made it a lot easier, like I said, to work with things. But it also, I think, in some ways, if you knew how to deliver value, you could deliver it a lot faster. If you didn't know how to deliver value, it just allowed you to do dumb things more quickly. And so
Exactly
that's
right. Those are the side
yeah,
effects of the modern. And when you create a lofty sort of uh, term for this era, like the modern data stack, a lot of people who move to the modern data stack do it feeling like we're more modern now. It's going to solve all our problems. And then
yeah,
once you're left not having solved all your problems, it feels worse because there's an expectations problem, right?
yep, yeah, for
But that's a
sure.
you problem. That's not a modern data stack problem.
That's exactly it. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. Like I feel like even just practices like data modeling and whatnot, and kind of old school stuff was kind of thrown behind because it wasn't modern anymore. So
Right.
then I guess you find out what happens when you ignore it too, which is what a lot of data teams are discovering now.
Here we are.
So
Yep.
here we are. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on the modern data stack? I mean, you think when you say tech, the higher order side effects of it, the good and the bad. Um,
Yeah. Higher order side effects wise, I think the labor costs of kind of working with the data have kind of drastically gone down. A lot of people are just like learning SQL and able to learn SQL because of kind of the access that they now have.
mhm.
But I think that kind of poses a challenge because now it feels like we have more work to do, a different kind of work than we had previously, namely teaching people about data literacy. So again, it feels worse because this is new work that the modern data stack has sort of put on our plate, but it's work that we should have been doing all along anyways. So we have a new blocker.
Yeah.
I guess there's new problems on the critical path to achieving value from your data.
Interesting. So if you were to again put on your benevolent leader of the modern data stack world, what is there any things you would do to solve this?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, if I knew, I'd probably be pivoting, starting a company in this direction. But I do.
You might get inspired right now. Who knows? So
yeah, maybe this is it, Joe. Maybe you got me. I was looking at the state of analytics engineering that DBT published last week, and the problems seem like they haven't really changed. It's data literacy, data quality. It's like, am I just reading the state of analytics engineering from 2000 or something? But I think I think there needs to be like a renewed focus on technology solutions that really, really own and acutely try to solve those problems. So when it comes to data literacy, maybe AI can help like automatically train and onboard people onto their kind of internal data and like actually give you sample queries and teach you how to work with the data and guide you along. I know there's like AI co-pilots out there, right and left with data, but maybe it'll work. Maybe there's something there in terms of teaching data literacy. And when it comes to quality, similarly, I think, data teams are notoriously understaffed. And if we had to keep hiring, I think someone would probably be focused on continuously monitoring the quality of your data. But maybe with AI, we can have kind of agents deployed continuously on our warehouses and data lakes, kind of monitoring the data quality, surfacing issues. Fixing them automatically feels hard because you got to talk to people. But maybe it can get us halfway there.
It feels like that's going to be part of the solution. I got a blog post back, I think it was November or something, where I quipped that it feels like the issues of data management and governance and all this stuff that's I think it's been kind of just festering for decades, really, right? Like data quality, data is a mess, all this stuff. Here's the deal: the data keeps growing, and especially with AI, with synthetic data and AI generated data, it's going to grow a lot more very, very soon. Like we're moving beyond the world of just rows and columns. We're moving into something different.
Yes.
And you're going to need automated solutions for this. Like there's no, if humans could, if we can't get this far with unstructured data with humans, and we're still talking about the same thing, then yeah, I think it's time to maybe start looking at different ways of tackling the problem. So look at the data management community, for example, right? And more power to them, and bless their hearts. But I can't say that the topics have changed over the last 20 years. Corporate data sets are still a hellscape.
Yeah.
Even the DBT report, the State of Analytics Engineering of 2024, it just came out, was it last week or something? But it was like, yeah, biggest issue. Guess what? Data quality, data sets are an absolute mess. Okay.
Unsolved problems. Yeah. Turns out technology doesn't solve everything.
Yeah, but we're kind of, I think, hinting at maybe we think it can, right? So
yeah, I think there was the promise, but I think there's more technology work to be done. I mean, I'm an engineer, so I do feel like there's going to be solutions for these, and these are things that we should be actively working on. But the reasons that these are, those recurring problems are still there is because they involve conversation and stakeholder management and kind of understanding across organizational boundaries. And so when we say it's a human problem, that's not me saying that like technology can't help solve it or can't solve it, maybe even entirely. It just means they're harder than, this isn't a dig at the modern data stack, but it's harder than separating data and compute or giving you a system to version control your SQL.
Infinitely harder.
Yeah.
And these are the things that aren't taught though either, right? If you look at the curriculum for data professionals, when they're still in school or when they're even receiving on-the-job training, continuous education, it's not like discussing things with stakeholders I've never really seen that as an option for a course. It's typically like advanced SQL, leak code stuff. Let me see what else. You go take a DBT course or get a certification or something like that. But and I'm looking at this page too on the State of Analytics Engineering report. I think it's page 7, and it talks about the number of people in the organization responsible for data infrastructure and data analytics. And if you're talking about a small company, these companies are severely short-staffed. I mean, what is it? 32%, 0 to 1 people responsible for infrastructure.
Yeah, it's insane.
But yeah, similar, and then maybe 2 to 5, and going on and up. And then as you get to bigger companies, obviously this scales. But if you're a smaller company, you're going to be doing a lot of stuff on your own.
Totally.
And
it's kind of at odds with another part of the report, which is kind of like how your impact is measured. I want to say.
Which page is that on?
Which I think it's. I'm looking at the online version here.
Yeah.
But I think it was saying your impact is measured. By far, it's on enablement of other teams and project.
Oh yeah.
Right. So like the pressure's on. You're understaffed, but you're being asked to really enable literally everybody else because data is everything. Yada yada. But it's a hard job. And I mean, when it comes to actually conversing with stakeholders, not only are the dynamics like pretty organization specific and you're learning on the job, but like the skills of conversing around data, presenting data, taking feedback and absorbing that back into your data systems. Like you said, not taught, something that we're all learning on the job. And we probably have to relearn in some different way at every organization we work with.
Oh yeah. The data literacy was another one. Poor stakeholder data literacy was. If we look at what is the challenges for data teams, poor data quality was number one. It's kind of hard to see because it's not ranked. This graph, like it's titled, "What do you find most challenging while preparing data for analysis?" It's not a continuous graph of like high to low, but poor stakeholder data literacy is one of the top ones as well. Actually, speaking of which, you're in Utah. I don't know if you've met Jordan Morrow.
I have not yet. I've heard of him.
Yeah. He's the godfather of data literacy. He'll be at this lunch tomorrow, actually, if you want to go show up. So
perfect.
But anyway, but yeah, he's booked all the time, traveling around the world, talking about data literacy. It's a huge problem. So
what does that actually? I always wonder with these surveys because people answer them with their definition of data literacy.
Yeah.
So I start getting into the weeds of like, oh, what does the height of this bar actually mean? You end up with issues around like surveys, et cetera. But what do you think data literacy actually means, or what do you think people actually thought it meant when they answered this?
I can't speak to the last part because I have no idea. I mean, the way I look at data literacy is the ability to have a coherent conversation about data. Right.
Yeah. An effective conversation. Yeah.
That's about
where
it.
people are actually communicating with each other.
Yeah, and you know how to leverage data in your organization. I think that's a consequence of understanding how to talk about it and how to think about it. But first and foremost, it's being able to definitely be able to effectively communicate about it, right? So
For sure. Yeah.
yeah.
What
This
do
is a
you
big
feel
one
is,
though.
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh no, what are you saying?
No, like the biggest blocker to that, right? Because I mean, I've been impressed at certain points, people who in an organization are really driven to understand the data and get insight from it. I mean, they're like learning SQL and writing like huge SQL statements to like get insight and like, wow, like maybe we are all data literate or have the potential to be data literate. And the potential is just really high. And we start speaking the same language. We're passing around queries, and everyone's kind of talking about the hard data when it comes to our shared conversations. But then there's other points where you start presenting something, and people are like, I don't really know what this column means, and you start getting into like the definition and the semantic layer kind of issues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, at the end of the day, the data teams are there to serve, the broader business, hopefully, and help them with whatever is going to drive value for the organization. That's all context dependent. But yeah, part of it I think is that data is still sort of a scary term for non technical people or non data people. So, and part of that I attribute just the fact that like math, at least in the U.S., it's taught terribly. Throughout grade and secondary schools and whatnot. So people have math right. The moment you start throwing numbers at people, they just kind of shut down. I notice, and so
Totally.
yeah, it's a real thing. I mean, and
a lot of people just drop out of math in high school effectively, right? They have one bad teacher, and
there's a lot of bad math teachers too. I mean, I can't say I did that well in math. I mean, I still got A's, but it's not like I didn't feel like I really understood it in high school. But it wasn't until I got to college and I ended up getting a degree in math. But that was because my eyes were open to a good teacher. But most people don't have that luxury or pain threshold to want to do that. So, or stupidity, I guess, put it a different way. But it's
that trifecta of becoming a math major.
Yeah, it's don't do it. But I think this does impact literacy too, right? Because it's like, okay, you show visualizations to people. You like to keep things simple. I mean, my favorite visualizations are just bar and line charts. I don't really do much else. That gets you most of the way there.
Totally. And the hard work as a data person, the hard work of reducing your insight to that, a bar chart, pie chart, whatever it is, that's the work worth doing.
It is.
You're totally right about the data side, like or the data literacy, and seeing the analogy with math, because it feels like, as a symptom of this, maybe this is like a litmus test. Whenever there's like a data quality issue, or let's say you're presenting a bar chart, you're like, this doesn't look like some other thing I saw some other day. Like someone else showed me a chart that's something different. And like the difference between someone who's like comfortable with the data and is not scared of data, broadly speaking, is someone who's going to like dig into it, versus I've seen a lot of orgs get into like an ignorance is bliss situation where it's like, yeah, I'll just kind of hand wave around that issue. And it's just like, both of them kind of align with my gut. So I'm just going to keep going here until this is something that someone really who cares more kind of asks me about.
But that's a key point though. You bring up something I think that sort of hits at the heart of the issue, is it aligns with my gut. Therefore it's fine. It makes me feel okay or good.
Yeah.
It doesn't make me feel bad.
Yeah. Right. Confirmation bias for you.
Mm-hmm. Happens all the time. I mean, this is sadly how a lot of companies are run. So,
yeah, it's a lot of, we hear a lot of that. I've talked to maybe 100 growth teams in the last few months, and it's a lot of, yes, that's an issue. Yes, that's an issue when we start posing, things that we've seen, data quality issues, yada, yada, everything that was in the analytics report there that we talked about. But in terms of urgency, a lot of them end up saying, most of the times things kind of align with my gut. It seems good enough is kind of the term we hear a lot in data.
Good enough.
Yeah. And so it seems like when things are kind of aligned with, things are working well enough and things are not, making you, like you said, feel bad or painful or not completely at odds with your gut, things are good enough and you're not really looking deeper. Which to me, I'm like, is data really offering much in that world? Is it giving you novel insight if you're just looking at it for confirmation bias? To me, data is supposed to be a source of truth, right? You're supposed to be staring the truth in the face. And to me, like, you can call me a data nerd or like obsessive compulsive or something. But when I see a difference between two bar charts, I'm not done until I like understand exactly why they're, a micrometer apart.
I'm usually the same way. I think it depends on what it is. Some parts, sometimes it's like,
it really does. Yeah. But it's going to, even if I ignore it, even if I, let's say, make a business decision to ignore it, it's still going to bug me a little bit until I'm on to the next thing.
For sure. Yeah. Because you're data literate too, right? So this stuff just registers with you. You sort of, after a while, you sort of develop a sixth sense for this sort of stuff. And you do see things that bug you after a bit. You're like, that just didn't seem right.
Yeah.
It's, actually, last week I was doing a podcast with the Changelog, a popular software engineering podcast, and we were talking about some other topic. But the one of the guests brought up Stephen Curry, the basketball player. So he was like just dribbling on a basketball court, just warming up, and I guess he was so in tune with the basketball court and the floor and dribbling that he noticed there was a dead spot in the floor somewhere.
Oh yeah, I remember that video.
Yeah, right, yeah. But but data people like yourself or like me, I think you just develop such a good intuition, or I wouldn't even say it's intuition. You just have it's some otherworldly sense of just what things should look like and things shouldn't look like. So
yeah, it's funny. I mean, the brain is amazing at that. It's just like you're pattern matching against the entire net sum of your history of data experience. So when people say experience, that's why experience matters. To me, that's what it means. You just have more metadata maybe to pattern match against, and knowing the difference between a problem worth chasing after versus not.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it turns out there's probably a lot of problems that aren't worth chasing after. I mean, it's just I think that's the other thing for data people. Just know when to pick your battles and where to focus. Because and a lot of companies too. I think there's problems worth solving, and there's problems that are probably they're nice to know, but most people aren't going to care. So the things that move the needle are things like what's going to make me more money at the end of the day, or conversely, I think cost savings is an interesting one. I think people care about it, but not as much as making money. So
no, exactly right. Yeah, they care about it when things are hitting the fan and there's a downturn and it's potentially competing with other cost reductions, maybe, because you're looking for ways to cut costs that don't involve firing your people or other drastic measures. But you're right. I mean, we literally saw it over the last year. People were, I think if you looked at Google searches for like cost reduction or cost optimization and the number of companies popping up in that space totally blew up. And then suddenly kind of the interest kind of waned over time because people started caring about top line revenue again. Yeah.
It's a cycle of business. The other thing that's interesting in this report, maybe to kind of close it out, was the many data teams want clearer goals. So there's two sections of this. My organization, I'm saying this quotes, my organization sets clear goals for the data team. We have a roadmap on how to positively impact the organization. Looks like a bit over 50% say somewhat agree, and sort of tapers off on either side with a strongly disagree and no opinion and strongly agree. And then almost the same trend for my organization values the data team. We are respected and included in decisions that impact our work. Again, somewhat agree, right? Is the strongest one. Again, it's not quite 50%, but a bit over 40.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the setting clear goals for the data team, I mean, I was actually kind of impressed that it was that, I was expecting more of a disagree there. But because data teams sometimes end up a little bit disconnected from, what we were just talking about, revenue, et cetera. They're enablers intrinsically by function. Yeah. It is harder. It is a skill for managers to be able to set good KPIs for data teams, and not everyone is very good at that. And so you don't feel like it's obvious what you're working towards if you're on the data team. So that's kind of an intrinsically hard problem about data teams, certainly at like less technical organizations. When it comes to kind of the values of the data team and respect, I think there's a feeling that maybe data is sometimes creating more chaos and conflicting answers, etc. So I think my guess is people who are, not on the data team and being asked this question are caught between two worlds. Like if you took the data away, I feel like I would be really in the dark about a lot of things. And, that's not a world necessarily I want to be in. I also know how hard my data folks are working, I hope.
Yeah.
But in terms of the value I'm getting, it's not that crystal clear value that I can articulate. Sometimes it feels like it's actually not creating insight, but creating confusion potentially.
Yeah.
So I think people are generally confused about the value and ROI of data teams.
Yeah, definitely. It's been the eternal question: is what's the value of this? And part of me wants to answer that, with a rhetorical question: what's the value of putting on your socks in the morning? But because I think there's certain mentalities that view data teams as sort of a coin operation thing. Like I'm going to put in 25 cents, I'll get out $1.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my ROI. But sometimes it's not that clear cut. So
yeah. I think some of it also boils down to what you're asking the data team to do, like what we were just talking about, like chasing after problems that actually matter for your business and not getting caught in like the minutia, but really asking the sweeping, harder, but simpler questions, and really focusing on nailing the answers to those questions, like things that are actually going to drive revenue.
For sure.
I think if we all focused on asking the data teams to do the right things, they'd be clearer on what they need to do, and we'd be getting more value from them.
Well, that's a world I want to live in. So awesome. It's been great chatting with you, Saf. Can't wait for you to get back to Salt Lake. We can maybe go grab lunch finally or something. But for people who want to learn more about you and what you're up to, how can they do that?
Sure. You can check me out on LinkedIn. I have a couple posts there about things I've been working on, and always happy to chat. Feel free to DM me, and I'm also on the DBT Slack, sometimes answering Snowflake questions there. Yeah.
Sick. Awesome. Well, Saf, good chat, and see you soon.
You too, Joe. See you back in Utah.
Yeah.